Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And I don't know if for those of you who check out on YouTube, if you can see, I'm going to give a shout out to one of my previous guests. I'm wearing my Let Freedom Bloom shirt from Heroic Gardens. If you might remember a few weeks back, Collie Turner from Heroic Gardens in Philadelphia. Things will be getting blooming soon and they need volunteers. So if you're in the Philadelphia area, they do great work working with veterans with plant therapy, horticultural therapy, all that good stuff. So shout out to them. But for this week, I want to focus on what we're going to talk about this week. I always like to say, for those of you who've listened, or maybe if you haven't, and this is your first time, I just think it's so important that we are open to connecting with people because we never know how they're going to show up in our lives and how we can show up for them. So, if you're, don't be afraid. I know sometimes people are shy or sometimes people don't want to head out. If you go out, open yourself up, be a little vulnerable, and go to an event that you've wanted to go to. Check out a club or an activity or something, especially if it's something that you think you guys you could support one another. You have shared ideals, concepts, values, things like that, because you never know how you're going to be able to help one another and connect. So, my guest this week, I always like to share how I know my guest. This is my first time meeting her today online, virtually, but I was connected with Lyndsay. It's Lyndsay Dragon. I was connected with her through Nina Judge. And you might remember Nina. Nina will be talking, we will be talking to her again soon. But Nina Judge was on last, I want to say August, September timeframe, and she spoke about the passing of her father, John Malvisi, by suicide. And that's why it led to her starting the John Malvisi Foundation. And she talks about awareness about mental health and suicide. And, Nina has just been a great supporter and she's connected me with other people. And it's so nice when people are like, you know what, I think you should meet this person because they're doing some great stuff. So without further ado, I want to share Lyndsay Dragon is here today from PAU. It's, oh my gosh, and I said I knew it before. It's yes, Parenting Autism United here in Northeast PA. But I'm sure even you folks out there listening beyond Northeast PA will definitely learn gain something valuable from today's conversation. So, welcome, Lyndsay.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Nina reached out to me and was like, I think you should talk to Lyndsay. And I did look at your website, the Parenting Autism United PAU. But before we get into that and all the great work that you're doing, if you don't mind, just sharing just a little bit about yourself, your background, whatever you want to share that you think is important to say about yourself.
Sure, I am originally from Oklahoma, so shout out to my Oklahomies. We lived in a military town, so I knew people from all over the U.S. And I visited a friend out here in good old Northeast PA for the St. Ubaldo Festival in 2002, and I had a great time. I love the East Coast, up and down from Maine to Florida, and I decided at 19 that this is where I needed to be, and I could afford living here as a 19-year-old. So that was important. But to go to all the major cities and just to have the different opportunities, it was the right place for me. And then I ended up going to Marywood University. So I have a degree in interior architecture and design. And after that, my whole life as in Oklahoma was sports related. So that is my ultimate, I could say I'm a jock at heart. And, then I went to school for art. So I worked for 6 years at Top Value Kitchens in Shavertown in the back mountain here. And I did that for 6 years and excelled and, got married and, met a dragon, I guess you'd say. And I didn't believe him at first. I also didn't believe that he was a mailman because to me, all mailmen at that, were old and, not cute in my mind. Sorry, guys. But that's just what I thought. So I was like, you're not either of those. So we ended up getting married in 2012. And we had our first child at 20 in 2014, and that's my little bit of a history. But within 6 months of my first son Jackson being born, we did notice that something was different.
Okay. So I want to ask you, so obviously you're here quite a while. So you've adjusted to
Yes.
Pennsylvania, right? Northeastern PA. And so obviously you've made a home, you settled in here. So what we're going to focus on today, and for my listeners to know, Lyndsay has Parenting Autism United, which is a nonprofit. So we're going to focus on, and April is Autism Awareness Month. We're going to focus on, Lyndsay's personal experience, but then talk a little bit about how it is for her. Maybe she can help other parents who have children with autism, or, I mean, any kind of, anything that's like an illness or something that you have to work on can be stressful in a home. It can be stressful on a family. So we're going to cover all of that and talk a little bit about the organization. But so, Lyndsay, I'm going to get back to what you said. You said it's 6 months. You kind of
Mhm.
knew Jackson. Is that your son's name?
Yes.
And now, is that early to know, or because you hear different stories from parents where sometimes it's years before they understand what's going on, or that there is anything that you might say is different.
And that is 100% correct. Autism is kind of like if you've ever read the, what to expect when you're expecting books. This may or may not be normal for your child, and everyone is different. So this may or may not be a sign. And the signs are extremely, babies develop at different rates. That's just all there is to it. But I don't know what it was. It was my first child, and I don't have my family here. So I didn't spend a lot of time with my nieces and nephews, unfortunately, as they were, infants. But I swear, I just knew. I said I said at the time, something is wrong. I've adjusted my, speech a little bit to something was different. And because now I'm educated, and that's not, it takes monumental amounts to offend myself. So, anything is okay if that's how you're understanding it. And then, through time, through education, we change the way we talk about it. So, at the time, I said there's something wrong. And at our 9-month appointment, my husband didn't really agree with me at the time either. But I said to the doctor, I said, something's wrong. And she was Bosnian. And she just said, oh, we wait and see. We wait and see. So I said, okay, and then we did find out around at our 1 year appointment. I said something was wrong, but then we also had to have emergency surgery for a blocked ureter. So that kind of took precedence over. And he was born with it. We knew he was going to have checkups on that, but at a year old, nothing had um, worked itself out as they were waiting to see. So we did the emergency surgery route down in Danville at Janet Weiss Children's Hospital, and from that point on, we became pregnant with our second child, and from 11 weeks on, I was put on bed rest.
Oh,
So I
wow.
have this toddler who I know that something is different. And then we find out we're excited to have another one. And I still don't have any answers, and nobody's really talking about it. So I'm the oldest of my friends, my friend group, and I was the first one to get married and the first one to have children. So I was already kind of isolated. And then it was obvious that something was different with Jackson, but nobody would talk about it. And my family wasn't from here. So we did go on a vacation in September to Oklahoma because we love the Oklahoma State Fair. It's one of the best ever. And while I was there, I had some complications with my pregnancy, and that's when I was put on bed rest. So we came back, and I can't remember what I ate yesterday, but I can remember these dates like there's no tomorrow. That following Monday on September 28th, Jackson was going in for his 18-month appointment. I had gone into my doctor that morning, and 3 different doctors told me I was going to miscarry. So that was my state of mind, was like, I'm going to miscarry. This is what's happening. Now we have to go right to his appointment. And I just said, she said again, let's wait and see. And I said, I can't wait and see. We have to do something today. And if you're not going to do it, I'll just go to somebody else who will. I don't know what it is that we have to do, but that is what we have to do. And she gave me the information for early intervention as we were walking out the door. And I called early intervention. That was September 28th. We had our first, meeting on October 14th because they had 2 weeks to, get started. And instantaneously, you can see what somebody's eyes are saying because there were 2 people there. So they kept having that conversation back and forth with their eyes. And there I am sitting on the floor because I'm not supposed to be moving a whole lot. And my husband's looking at me because we're both looking at them. And it was obvious, that something was going on. So we filled out the information to get evaluated. Um, but during that time frame, the struggles between my husband and I, what to do. I wouldn't do any research because I don't trust Google for that it, amount of seriousness. Um, for a splinter, how to take out a splinter, I'm fine.
Yeah, yeah. Can I ask you? I just want to pause just
Yeah.
for a second. What were you noticing that made you think something was different?
I was propping him up in between my knees, and just trying to play, and he just wasn't engaging with me as far as eye contact goes. And I kept thinking he might have hearing problems, but we would take his pacifier and just like twirl it in between our hands, and it would hit my nails and make that noise. And he would come from across the house. He would come flying in for that pacifier. And we would do our own little, like, little noises of little TV things that we knew that he liked or sounds. So we ruled that out on our own, but we still had to wait to get an appointment. But he would also take like a toy that is a very typical toy, like a truck. And, most kids would, move it back and forth, which is typical, right? But then he would mostly just turn it over, never use it in that manner, but he would always spin the wheels excessively. And he would get real close to it and have this funny look on his face, which was adorable, but it was like, oh, look at that. But when you step back and look at it, that was all he was doing.
Mm,
um, and then we would go out for a dinner date or a movie, and our friends would say, oh, he was so great, he flipped through the phone book the whole time. I'm like, he's 2 and he flipped through a phone book for 3 hours. But it was something that just it was amazing to them, and he enjoyed it. Why would they stop him? And at 9 months old, he was able to watch a whole movie through and through, Wreck-It Ralph. But 9-month-olds can't normally do that, or
yeah,
don't normally do that. So
yeah.
we just noticed there were a lot of things that were just really neat and cool, but not really something that you would expect. And then the things that typical, babies and toddlers were doing, he was not doing. He wouldn't come to us for much of anything. Um, I can say he's been pretty self sufficient. Not that he was able to do that. So when he wasn't looking for something, he wouldn't point or talk or anything like that. He would get very frustrated, and then he would maybe grab our hands and just throw it at that item, whether it was the TV, the refrigerator. But there was no real communication. But he didn't know how to point like, I want that.
Mm,
So those were our number one indicators. And his initially, you get the basic sounds of mama and dada, but then he had no language. He would just grunt and kind of, moan at things. So yeah, we were really frustrated with the wait and see. And this is, we just wait. And I'm like, I can't wait. I don't know about you, but as a parent, even if I'm just a fur baby, fur mom, you can't wait and see when you feel in your gut that something is wrong.
yeah, yeah. So then you said an assessment, right? Was that how so what was involved with that? And then I know you mentioned, I kind of sidetracked you. You and your husband kind of had differing ideas about this.
Yeah, when early intervention first came to our home, they had a checklist that they went down. And if he was delayed in, I think, 9 out of 12 areas, then he would qualify to be evaluated for autism or other, significant delays. And we had some family members who worked in the mental health field or, in daycares and things like that, and who were more um, versed at that time than we were. And a lot of people, we talked to people who we trust, and they said, you don't want to label. You don't want him to have a label. So don't let them give him a diagnosis. And at that point, my thought process was, if he gets a diagnosis, we still don't have to tell anybody. Like, but we can still get him the help he needs. and or start that help. And if it's not the right thing, even with early intervention, I didn't tell a single soul because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what they were supposed to do. Early intervention, I hear intervention and I think of drug addicts with the show Intervention. And that's not like a big deal, as far as like everyone's life is their own. But that's the only thing I thought about was something extremely negative from the very beginning. That one word, intervention, that it was just a negative connotation for me. Um, but my husband was really looking to family and friends for advice. And none of our family or friends had history with autism. So everyone was kind of guessing. And that was also something I'm just not willing to accept. I'm a very type A personality. And it's, for me, it's black and white. There's not a lot of gray. There's something going on. We need to figure out what it is, plain and simple. How do we figure that out? We go through this route because they're the ones willing to help us. And that was my thought process. And he wasn't against it. My husband, he wasn't against it. He was just nervous, as expected, and as anyone should be. Ultimately, we didn't waste any time before we had our evaluation, which was January 22nd of 2016. I was 7 months pregnant, still on bed rest. So his brother Owen was fine, by the way. So no instances with that. But I was on bed rest the entire time. Oh, it was frustrating.
Oh, I can
Um,
imagine.
but
Especially for a type A, right?
exactly. Oh my goodness, it was horrible. And Jackson really likes pressure, so he enjoyed being thrown around a little bit. Played with roughly, and I just couldn't do that. So it really did have an effect on our relationship. Unfortunately, it took me a few years to get that back, but we ended up just fine. But so he was 22 months old on January 22nd, and we went into, they call it the catch team, and there were 9 people in the room. And then there I am, extremely emotional, obviously, and Tim. And Tim had kind of accepted it at that point. He was doing all the Google research, and he was more prepared. And I refused to look at anything because I'm not going to worry myself in the event that it's not that. I have too much to worry about right now already. So it instantly became very clear through the entire evaluation. His deficits got worse between when early intervention came and when we had this evaluation. So it was very obvious at that point what it was, but I still hadn't done any research. So that's when I was like, okay, now we can move forward. Now we can start telling people. And one of the first things that I did was I went to the website Autism Speaks. And they have now they have several different 100 days, but then they had the first 100 days of autism. So the day you get diagnosed, and of course, type A, it was printed in color in a binder, ready to rock. And I went through the checklist and did everything I was supposed to do, and that made me feel really good. It made me feel like I was in control. I was doing what I needed to do as a parent, and I was doing what I needed to do for, my family. So we did that. And once I started learning about things, I mean, he has classic autism. So there's no doubt.
Mm.
I know because the spectrum is so big, that's another reason why it's so confusing, because you can have a child with autism who's completely nonverbal, no motor skills, no bathrooming skills. And then you can have somebody who's, Elon Musk.
Mm. Right.
So I don't know how the spectrum is still not able to be divided like it was prior with Asperger's and, different levels, but it's still a very young diagnosis compared to all the others. And it's also one that you can't see. And it's one that you can't do a blood test for. So it's really hard to start your life, relearn how to live life with something that not a lot of people know a lot about.
Mm. So it's really about what they're watching behavior really to assess, to determine, right?
Yes. So, I went to school for art. I basically majored in athletics in high school and my entire life. And so now that's here we are. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, yeah. Which I'm sure it is stressful. I'm sure two young parents and you've got a second. And so what did you find resources you needed? I mean, you had your first 100 days, which was good, but I imagine you need more than that.
Yeah, we started going to support group meetings. There was one organization, and it's called SAFE, and it stands for Supporting Autism and Families Everywhere. And they would offer monthly support group meetings. And so we would start going to them. And what would happen is it's a volunteer based nonprofit. So the person who was presenting would be either somebody within that organization or a guest speaker, but it was about topics that, through the age group that was currently involved with the organization. So the first meeting we went to was about college. you know
Mm.
we're newly diagnosed, but now I know that there are multiple colleges that we could go to if we chose to send Jackson somewhere, um, depending on how his interest levels. But that was great because I now had one answer, you know and so that was good. And then the next one we went to was about financial planning, and again, things that we need to know because it's different for special needs, but not really where we are right now. So I started asking the organization if they had anything for newly diagnosed families, and they said, well, if you want to do something. And I was like, watch what you say right now.
To a type A, right?
Yes. I was like, I need you to really think about this before you say I can do something. Um, but within a year, I had already developed multiple programs. I had a huge amount of families that were consistently coming, and I've made friendships that I still have today. But I knew that if I wanted to get where I needed to be as a caregiver, I had to submerge myself among the people who are in that world because I didn't know a single person, and neither did my husband, who was in that world. And I instantly felt one, I learned about nonprofits and volunteering. I felt like I had not done enough in my life and I was a horrible human being. Um, because it was like, this is all volunteer based. I was like,
Yeah.
wow. Like, it's not that I never did it. I just didn't even realize it was a thing that you could and or should do. When I thought of volunteering, I thought of like soup kitchen or picking up garbage. I mean, that was it. So this opened up my eyes to an entirely new world. And so that made me feel better after I was starting to do more things like that. But, I was able to bring my children with me. And I was a stay at home mom. His brother, Owen, they're 2 years and 10 days apart. So they were both in the stroller at one point, and we just started, we were worried about Owen because we had so many complications during the pregnancy. And we asked what are it was 50-50, whether he was going to have autism or not. So we did a lot of evaluations, but really, we're still just winging it here.
Was it, I would add, you're from Oklahoma, so do you have family here of your own, or I
I
was imagine
don't.
that's a challenge. Yeah.
Well, and it was very interesting that you say that because families in general can be, obviously extremely different, but the Midwest is so different from the South and West, coast, and obviously Northeast. But when I spoke to my family about autism, one, they treated it like it was like cancer. And it was just like so devastating. And one of the first things that my sister said to me was, and this is the first person that I told, and this is the first thing that she said was, I'm so sorry that he's not going to be able to show you love.
Mm.
And of course, I was already devastated, and that made it so much worse because this is my number one person telling me that. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, And then for my husband's family, they came at it as, you know what, he'll get over that. You're over parenting. Boys learn slower than girls, that type of thing. And so it was too extreme on one side and not almost enough on the other. So we were still kind of alone, even though we had started telling people. And it just, and so when we were parenting his brother, it was like we were new parents again because we didn't know what a typical child would be like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just very different. Um, but the organization Safe, when I walked into their building and their location, I can tell you right now, I've never had this feeling before, but as soon as I crossed that threshold, I knew I was in the right spot. And it's unbelievable. I knew from that day, and I've never changed my mind on that. Like, it changed my life in a positive way. I saw adults who had adult children with autism. They were happy, they were funny, they were showered and had their stuff together. So it really gave me a lot of insight that there was no way that that could come from a clinical setting.
Would you think that, I mean, there is stigmas surrounding so many different things. Do you think people misunderstand? And I think this goes to your prior point about the spectrum, like how
Mhm.
different people with autism really can be in the different degrees. But do you think there's a really misunderstanding, like your sister said, you won't no love from him? And there is kind of this idea that, oh, people with autism don't know how to show emotion or love. Do you think that most of us, if we don't have experience, we just don't understand?
1000%. And I kind of feel like when you have a diagnosis of autism, people are scrutinizing you more because they have to look at you to take data on all your stuff. Well, imagine if someone was taking data on you. Are you allowed to have a bad day? Are you allowed to tap your foot? Are you allowed to click your pen or chew on that ice that you love so much? What we don't understand, and it's nobody's fault, but these individuals are literally doing the same things we are, but in their own way. So instead of tapping their foot like I am right now, he would be flapping his hands. You know, it's a way for him to exert that anxiety that is innate. It's in us all the time. We all have different things that we do. We all have bad days. We all want to be left alone at some time, and we all, want things. It's not difficult to say I want ice cream. But it might be more, easily understood from a neurotypical perspective that you have to have your dinner first. And that's where it's like, well, why? I don't want my dinner. I want the ice cream now. And it's not infantizing anyone, but sometimes that understanding process just isn't there. The brain is literally wired differently. It's not any less because we just have to figure out how that person learns. But when you go to teachers, they have to figure out how everyone learns in their classroom. There's visual learners. There's, hand over hand is what I call it, but I can't remember what it's called right now for teaching styles. But when you realize that they're just another person and these are the things that they do and you do them too, I think that is a big eye opener for people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you make a great point though, because we all have our own coping or habits. I pull up the skin on the side of my finger, which is a nervous habit. But if people looked at it closely, they'd be like, ew. But I mean, we all do something, right? So, and to your point of learning differently, it's not wrong. It's just the world maybe not prepared for it, but everyone's a little bit different. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
there's that famous saying that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And but that's the same thing with any individual, adult or child. If you meet, one Janine, you meet one Janine. There might be 70 million more, but they're all different.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Let me
just don't understand why they're compartmentalized because
yeah.
of autism.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And again, I think it comes down to information and education. So we need to keep and learning so that we can be
Yeah.
better supportive and understanding and not judgmental and not putting that stigma on there. Um, so tell me about what led to you have Parenting Autism United, PAU, and I will put the link to your website in the show notes here. Tell me what led to that, and then what your organization is all about, what you felt you wanted to give to other parents.
Well, at one point in my journey, I couldn't absorb anymore. And at that point, I was, completely stressed out. My second child, there was nothing really wrong with him other than he was extremely anxiety ridden and needed to be, 1000% attention. And I had all these other families telling me, make sure you parent him, don't don't let it be to where you're only taking care of your son with autism. And so we were very conscientious of that early on. And at one point, I just couldn't stop crying. And I said, something has to change. And, I called my doctor, and it usually took months to get in. And I said, his program at the time, Jackson's, was like 8:30 to 11. And I called on the way in and I said, I can't stop crying. My husband thought I might have had postpartum depression, but I knew it wasn't that. But again, crazy people don't think they're crazy. So I said, well, I'll call the doctor. And so I did. And I said, I just, I need to see someone. And they got me in that day at 11:30. So here I am going through a diagonal double door with a double stroller. And it was probably one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. The doctor had to call my husband and say, your wife can't take care of your kids. You have to come get them. We can't let her leave with them. And I just looked at him when he came in, and the look in his eyes, I felt like I failed as a wife and a mother. But I know, and I knew then, that our brains are, what they are. I probably should have always been on some sort of antidepressant, or something. But I knew at that point that I couldn't go on the way I was. And so I got connected with, my sertraline as my savior, Zoloft pretty much. But it really did. I'm a very optimistic, happy person at heart, and I couldn't put a smile on. And that, I wasn't myself, and I didn't recognize any part of me. So after making that change and getting on the medications and, getting through that part, I was really able to almost network more within the autism fields. I ended up going to work at the Graham Academy, which is a school for kids with autism K through 21, now 22.
Hmm.
I was there for public relations and marketing, and I did that so that I could get an inside look at the administrative side of autism, how school works. My son was still only in his autism programs, so he wasn't in school yet, but I got a good look at it. So I was educating myself by being around other people. And then that organization sold to a different company, but I ended up moving out to the Misericordia Autism Center. And I did that on March 3rd. And then on March 9th in 2020, we got sent home for COVID.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah. So during that entire process, as a parent, I'm telling everyone what I need. And I'm seeing how things are being run, and I'm seeing what people are able to offer. So a good thought process is, why don't you just do this? This would be so simple. Well, service providers or school districts, they can't do everything. And it takes a long time to realize that it's not their fault that something isn't available. You go online, you see all these great things that are happening in Philly or Seattle and Phoenix, and you're like, why can't we do that here? It's like, well, because it's Seattle, Philly, and Phoenix, but here we are, good old Northeast PA, and these things are great, but they just don't exist here.
Mm.
And I think I was just so tired of hearing that. And me and a few other moms would get together once a month. The first Wednesday of every month, we would get together and have a couple drinks, and our kids were all different ages, but they were all in the same school district. And so we would talk about it, talk about things. Sometimes we'd have a lot of drinks. Sometimes it would be just a salad, and a water. You never knew what was going to happen. It depended on the day. But we finally just said, let's do it ourselves. How can we do it? And because I had been kind of floating around trying to learn as much as I could, I had the resources to go through the Luzerne Foundation and promote, our stuff so that we could get started earlier through them. So they host our nonprofit status, as they do for over 400 other nonprofits in our area. And we got started in November of 21 as an actual nonprofit. And it started out as just support because that's what we needed. COVID really messed a lot of things up for everyone. But for our families here in Northeast PA, it crushed us. And so we started with support. And then, I enjoy programming. It's something I enjoy doing. And I started with story time. And so we do a Dragon Tales reading and art program. We got a few grants for it. And I dress up. I make myself a fool. And I love it. It's Halloween all the time. I go all out, and we would either do it in-house, we would do it at a daycare, a school, or a park, and we would do a story time that would be open to everyone but tailored to autism. And then we do a craft that goes along with it. Usually have a snack that, if we can tie it in, it's hard to tie in a snack to the wonky donkey. Just going to say that.
I don't know what a wonky donkey. Okay, a donkey.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So it's a children's book that's really fun to read. But I couldn't tie in snacks to every book. So, but really, that's how it started. And every program that we have comes from an experience that we had that was maybe not so positive. So for mine, it was trying to sign up for a second story time, and they said, "Why don't you come back when he's not as distracting?" And I'm like, "Well, we'll never be back, but thanks." And now I have a new program. And that was kind of the joke. It was like, you have a problem? We'll create a new program. But it was really starting off with, what the parents said they were needing, what places locally are able to provide and they're not able to provide. They want to say something, but they're not allowed to. There's too many flags. So that's kind of where we are. We really wanted to just be real with people. It's like, I know you know the answer and you just can't tell me. So tell somebody else and then they can tell me, So
Proper
that's what I guess.
protocol, right?
Right. Yeah. And it was so frustrating. But I did go to a lot of different organizations, foundations and whatnot, because I don't want to recreate the wheel.
Right.
If it exists, why would I try to do it again?
Yeah.
And that was kind of the, if it exists somewhere else, can we bring it here? But if it doesn't exist somewhere else, am I not looking correctly? Or do we have to create it from scratch? And so that's where all of our programs started, is we need it. Does it exist? And if it doesn't, how can we make it happen?
Yeah. And I think, and I apologize, I kind of leaped over from the beginning to when you started this. So you started this in 2020 and your son was born in 2002, was it? Or
14.
2000, I'm sorry, 2014. So is he 7 now or 8?
He is 9, almost
9.
10.
Okay, I wasn't doing the math there real quickly. That wasn't my strong suit. I'm a creative type, but anyway.
Same girl, same.
Yeah. So we kind of jumped over, but I wanted to, if you don't mind, just go back for a minute or two. So you said when he was young, you kind of had that like awareness of your own stressors and your own emotional and mental health. Was that something that you think was kind of just you just weren't paying attention to? You're like, oh, it's nothing, or did the stress kind of bring it out for you? And obviously it's good that you got help for yourself because you were under, I mean, this is a big, it's a lot to be a caregiver, but
Oh,
what
yeah.
was that experience like for you? Or were you maybe ignoring the signs because you were taking care of everyone else?
I was extremely, extremely stressed with the differences of going from a dual income family to a single income family, in addition to being on bed rest and every day thinking I was having a miscarriage, and to also knowing that there's all this whole new thing. I need to go back to school and learn about autism. And, people would be talking and the language is so different, and I would stupidly, I would say, they'd be like, "Do you understand?" And I'm like, "Uh huh. Yep, I sure do." And then I would get home and try to, or get off the phone, or they would leave, whatever. And I would instantly try to Google everything that just happened so that I could then understand it. And I don't know why I did that, but turns out I'm not the only one. A lot of parents do that. And so that's one of the things I noticed about myself is like if somebody's now talking and I'm not understanding, I'll just stop them. Like, go back. I need you to explain what you just said. And people don't even realize they're doing it. And they ask, do you understand? And if we're saying yes, then they're just going to keep going. And that was a huge problem for me that I understood way too late. But the stresses with the, financials, and then of course, your marriage. And I think it's higher than 50% of marriages that have a child with autism specifically, not a medical disability, but with autism, end up in divorce because of the stresses. And so we really wanted to, and that's the thing. We're trying to learn from the other families. We're trying to learn from the professionals. We're trying to learn our own child, you know, and in the process, ruling out all medical things. We have to hold them down for everything. It was just a nightmare. And that's the only way I can explain it. It was an absolute nightmare. So if you're living a nightmare, you're going to have stress.
Mm.
And, you've lost all your friends, your family at that point. You got this. You can do it. I was like, Mom, I might be, in my mid 30s, but you're still my mom and I still need your advice. And she's like, oh, you got this. And I'm like, that's not helping. And then I would get really mad. And then it took me a long time to realize they are helping in the ways that they know how. But it took me several years of being bitter to understand that. And I think that that is a very similar aspect for many families. But so then I started making support groups for families. And speaking of the wonky donkey, I had a flyer with a donkey on it. And it said, you're not an ass if you don't understand autism. Here's a chance with no families for you guys to ask whatever you want to without fear of offending your loved ones or your friends. And it was a highly attended event. And it's just crazy how much people don't understand. And it's kind of like that age old, you think that since you know it, other people do too. And they just
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
I don't remember anybody in my school that had autism. So, I mean, I graduated in 2000. I don't feel like that's that long ago.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I didn't know a thing about it. And I don't know why. I just assumed other people did once I did start learning. That was a huge, huge realization for myself and for my husband. We both did it.
Yeah. So now you have this organization and it's helpful, but how do you for yourself keep your own stressors or in check or your own mental health so that you don't let that get away from you? Because obviously you have to take care of yourself. And yes, you have to take care of your kids, but you've got to take care of yourself. And that's hard for women, I think, a lot.
That's hard for women so much. And I just use the airplane mentality as much as I can. I say you have to put your own mask on first, and then you can help other people, because that's something that when I'm helping a family or an individual, that's something that they understand. And that's I try to drop in humor for as much as we can. It's laugh or die. And I think that that is, if you can help somebody laugh at the situation. My son covered the entire bathroom with feces. But what happened was he was trying to wipe and it got stuck. And then he was trying, so there's all this stuff. You can't focus on the bad, and you have to focus on the good and the funny. Um, you realize that if you have to make 3 different dinners that night, it's worth it. If one kid has severe, aversions, and the other kid learned from him, but has a completely separate set of severe aversions. It's just one of those things but that could be any parent anywhere. And that's the thing. It's like, I get to have an excuse about why I have to go to the store every other day to buy strawberries, because that's his main food source. But it's better than if it were chicken nuggets or French fries, which we
Yeah.
still eat all the time. But, taking the other thing is type A was really difficult to learn how to go with the flow. I envy people who can just roll with it because it's so hard for me. And they do say that, the apples don't fall far from the tree. So we did do the genetic testing through Geisinger's Spark program. And I am missing an X chromosome, and so is Jackson. So it's pretty certain he got his traits from myself. But the way I said, well, why don't I have autism? The way. And they said, because you have an X chromosome to back yours up. He has a Y.
Hmm.
So he's missing a lot of that. And there's some other things, but not of significance on his panel. But so for me, it's just, extremely difficult because I do see a lot of things black and white. I am extremely literal. So he looks like me. He's got, he is my kiddo through and through. But for me to let go of some of my things was very liberating, but it took years to get there. I do preach you got to take care of yourself, and I'm the worst person for that because I will catch myself all the time. But I think it's just knowing yourself. I do know that I need alone time. I don't handle a lot of noises very well. Come to find out, that's a trait too. Um, but like I'll catch myself on a 45-minute drive when the radio wasn't even on because it's just so chaotic at the house. And then I was working in the school where all the kids were, it felt like my kid was 75 people around me were my kid,
Wow.
so I was like, it wasn't the right spot for me. And then now that I have different programs that have different ages and, we see a nice mix of professionals, individuals, parents, and kids, it's not anywhere where it used to be, but that was sending me over the edge. And so now I think the biggest thing that I can do it's being not honest and not direct. It's, if you can't make that dinner on Saturday night, don't tell them you will and then feel anxious about it for the next 5 days. Tell them you can't make it and say, you know what, but we'll reschedule. It's not because I don't want to go, but I'm exhausted right now.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with just saying you can't go. So I caught myself just saying yes to everyone because that's what I want to do. But is it realistic? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I think
And,
that's a huge thing.
and is it in your best interest? Not, especially when you're depleted, right? When you're just wiped. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
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 Um, it's nuts all the time
Yeah.
as
Do you
life is.
do you find, besides peace, obviously you like some peace and quiet, do you find time for like an activity that's just for you or something else for your own self-care?
So what's really good about the programs and that I'm the executive director is that everything that I do here is something that I like for myself. And I think that that is strategic and crazy awesome because even if nobody comes, I get to be here and do some really fun stuff that is important to me. And I was able to bring in all of my art materials that I've had since college. I was able, we got lots of really great donations from local places like Paper Magic and Sargent Art in Hazleton. And we really were able to design programs around things that I love and things that other people enjoy too, things that bring you happiness. And that's that creative side. Because when you're doing something creative, you're not able to use that other side of your brain and you can't focus on all the stressors and stuff. So, what every program that we have brings something positive to me. And we even have parent only nights where if you wanted to come here and like talk bad about everything and say how much it kind of can suck, that's okay. I don't want you to do that when your kids are here. I don't want you to do that when somebody else is here with their kids, even if you're not here with yours. So there's a time and place for that, and we offer that. but most of the time, people are here and they want to do fun things on those nights. So a lot of the dads get to play the old school Guitar Hero. We pulled that out of the attic. And that's what I'm saying. It can be anything. So we have the original Nintendo. We've pulled that out of my father-in-law's house whenever we were clearing out his estate after he passed a few years ago. And that's what I'm saying. It's just weird how nostalgia can really bring us together. And also we do like dad jokes, we try to bring in the dads as much as we can because they kind of get the short end of the stick when the moms are always the ones going to appointments and stuff. For not all of them. It's just a general statement there. But yeah, every one of our programs brings in some form of art. And one of my goals as a younger professional was to one day have a gift shop. I very much enjoyed the funky names of local gift shops. There used to be in Dallas the Blue Hydrangea. But when I went to Marywood, I lived in Peckville, and there was the Lavender Goose. And I
Oh
just
yeah.
loved going to all these different little funky named places. And I always wanted a gift shop. But I always liked creating too, but I'm not one of your fine artists. But what I've been able to do is bring everything that I've ever wanted into this space. And it has really, I think, it's been amazing for me. Um, and then in that process, we do open featured artist nights. So we do feature local artists and so we throw in some of those general community events because the one thing that I can say is just the most important thing for our organization is that we're open to everyone, all ages, all abilities, but tailored to autism. Clearly, the name tells you we're parents with kids with autism. Um, However, it's one community. And there were so many organizations and events that I could only take Jackson to because he had autism, but his brother wasn't able to participate. Even if I paid him in cash, which I was wanting, it wouldn't matter. He can't do it. And I'm like, well, then we can't come because, this is a family event. This isn't so we just figured why separate it? Because then we're segregating ourselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we are open to absolutely everybody. We've had a artist night where we featured a mother and son duo. The mother was an established artist and career in graphic design, and her son is 19 years old now. He goes to the Graham Academy, and he brought in a lot of his art too. And it was just really cool to have a family dynamic. But we do feature different artists from anywhere, and it could be a 5-year-old's, set. We had a 6 or 7-year-old girl who did nonverbal with autism who created a whole series of dinosaurs sleeping out of Play-Doh.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and they were extremely detailed. Her mom had to sneak them out of the house because if she saw them leave, she wouldn't have allowed it. But they dried them in the oven and they glazed them, and it was just an amazing thing. And that's kind of where we're just providing a space that's open for everyone. It's open for our kids with autism. It's open for, the person who lives 5 doors down and wants to enjoy story time, but they're being exposed to kids with different, behaviors and learning how to be their friend at an earlier age. And we have the adults that come in. Usually we have Tuesdays, we have some adults come in. We just moved our office location. So now we moved from Wyoming to Dallas. So we're a little discombobulated. So we're going to wait till next week. But it's important for younger families to see older individuals with autism so that they can learn. And then they can also maybe push harder on their own, process of making sure that something happens, like going to the dentist, getting those things done. It's really difficult. It's easy, super easy to put those things off.
Mm.
But you have to do that for your kids. You just do. But to even give those adults who may not have language or motor skills, giving them a place to go, think of that. Like, they don't really have, there's no services for the adults hardly in this area. So we provide a safer spot, and they're not coming in to clean, but they will be doing something functional. So if I'm doing something, if I'm working on, say, making a bracelet, I'm just using that as an example. I'll hold up 3 colors or even just 2, and I'll say, which one do you like, blue or red? And so they're involved in the process, some way, shape, or form. We have an established garden program,
Oh,
and
wow.
that sensory, really goes in, and we harvest the seeds and we sell those. So I might bring in the marigolds after they've dried out a little bit and have them kind of, mess around, because there's going to be millions of seeds, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And then we dry those out, and then they may help, take one little pinch and put it in an envelope that we then give out at the trunk or treats, or wherever. So we just try to be open and really flexible. If I could have one word that just describes us, it would be flexible.
Now
Not
it
me.
sounds yeah, not you. Yeah, but no, yeah, you're getting a little bit more flexible. It sounds like, right? You had to, right? I know April is Autism Awareness Month, and I was going to ask you if you do anything special, but it sounds like you do a lot as it is on a regular basis, right? Do you have anything planned that's in particular that's kind of a celebration or an awareness to let people to say, hey, come on, this is an observance? Because I think observances, I always like to say, whatever your thing is, like March is Women's History Month. I like to celebrate women
Right.
all the time, every week on this podcast. But we do need these observances because it does kind of help put like a spotlight and say, hey, let's learn about this. So is there anything that you have going on that you want to promote?
Absolutely. We have a community day supporting autism with a silent art auction. So we're trying to do one event at each school district so that we can get involved with the school districts and those families, and the teachers then know who we are so that they can help their students and their families as they come through. So this one is being hosted at the new Wilkes-Barre High School, and they have the most beautiful corridor that's set up, and it's perfect for like an art show. And then it goes right into an open space for their cafeteria, which is where we'll have vendors for resources. We have food trucks that are coming, and it's free to be a vendor. We want to push those resources, but we also want, like, say, Jamie's mom has her own store, so she's a mom who has a child with autism. We would definitely love to have you here to get your business out there. So it's all about supporting the community as a whole, and not just you know certain places. Also, a lot of resource agencies, service providers, their wait lists are so long right now. A lot of them are not going to these events because they can't offer families services right now.
Mm.
And that's what we want to get away. We're celebrating the awesomeness and the diverse part of our community by coming together. And so whether you have openings or not, this is a chance to have fun. It's not about therapy. We have the art auction is from any artist, any age. When they fill out their registration form, they can either identify as a neurotypical or a neurodiverse person if they choose to. It doesn't matter if they don't. But that's all ages, all abilities. And for, you can enter your art. And there's not really any restrictions other than it can't just be on construction paper without a frame you know.
Yeah.
um, we
And when
are,
is this? I'm sorry, when is this?
this is Saturday, April 6th at
Okay.
the Wilkes-Barre High School from 10 to 2. We'll be face painting and, lots of fun stuff, but really just an open, fun area. And it's indoors because we do a lot of outdoor things. The Autism Awareness Walk is on May 4th, and that'll be outside, but you can never tell with the weather here what
Mm.
it's going to be like. So I try to do as many events indoors as possible just to avoid being uncomfortable, because if I'm uncomfortable, I'm not staying or I'm not even going. And that's another thing that we try to do. When you walk in here, if you don't feel comfortable almost instantly, then we did something wrong.
Mm.
But that's what we try to do, is just to bring life into it. And so April, we also have a campaign with fabric and like stitched hearts. And it's where our campaign is called Bringing Our Community Together One Stitch at a Time. I thought that that was fabulous, by the way.
That's very cute.
Yeah, so we leave these little, stitched hearts around the community. A lot of people are doing them. We have a friend in like Montana or Michigan, I can't remember, but she's snowed in all the time, and that would be either one, I think.
Okay.
But she was, I'm snowed in with my kids. We're going to make a bunch and send them to you, So we do have a lot of people helping us out. And that was kind of a nod to how can I be a part of it? I might be a grandma, or I might, I like to stay at my house. I don't really, want to be around kids a whole lot. I'm not mobile to do that. Yeah, we have so many people just making little hearts. And they said that that has helped them because they got together with an old friend and did it. And then they got to have their own little, catching up session. And they all felt really good after it because it was something great for the community. Um,
It's
and the other
amazing how cathartic things can be, even if it doesn't matter if you have someone in your life with autism, you're doing that, you feel good and you're contributing. I think that's great.
Yeah, and that's kind of where it's like, if you have an idea, throw it out there because it might just fall into place. And then the last thing that we're really trying to push for April is a paper airplane contest. And it comes from two things. The first thing would be there's a Temple Grandin book out there written for kids. And she actually, in her speech, and if you don't know who Temple Grandin is, she's a very famous professor and scientist who has autism. She has a movie made about her where Claire Danes plays her. And it's a beautiful description of how far autism has come since her day, because she's in her 70s, maybe 80s. So it's a very interesting thing. So, and I think that the movie is just called Temple. But she, when she does any speaking engagement, if you ever watch them, she almost always brings up, when was the last time a kid made an airplane? Get them off of their electronics and get them to make something and do something fun. And so she came out, she has several books, but there's one that's meant for, I would say, middle school, maybe fourth, fifth grade, but definitely middle school. And she says, this is how you make a general airplane, and this is how you make a really cool airplane. So that was one thing I wanted to do, but it also ties into our office lovers.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought of first. Yep. I
My
can picture
husband,
it instantly.
yes, yes. My husband is a huge Office fan, and in part, so am I. And so what we wanted to do was really tie it into both. I mean, it can be open to everyone. We're working with a few places for so that the winner would receive like a flight in from one of our local places. So we're still that's in the works, but either way, it'll still happen. But we really want people of all ages, to get involved, and they can do it in their office or in their classroom. And they can videotape it, or like we're still working out some of those details. But then the winners can all do it, virtually, and that's when we'll decide who the winner is. But it's just really cool to do something different. Like we're doing a Jenga tournament in a couple of weeks. Like it's just really fun.
That's great. I love your creativity. I mean, that's my wheelhouse too. So I'm all about that. I think that's fantastic. And I do think there's something so therapeutic and wonderful about creativity for everyone, no matter what you got going on and what,
Yep.
you're dealing with. Creativity can help you for sure. Like you
Yeah.
said, you can't be thinking of those. That's why I do laughter yoga, and I talk about the same thing with laughter therapy. When you're laughing, you can't be holding the negative thoughts. You can't be processing or worrying about stuff because you're in the act of laughing, and that
Yeah.
takes over, and that's good for you. It's the same as all this creative stuff that you guys are doing. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that we say is like it's your kids can come with you unless we tell you they can't. So I mean, what good does it do if we can't have our kids with us when we babysitters are scarce? A lot of daycares don't, aren't accepting because they don't have somebody trained in autism, and they're private, a lot of them, so they can do that. And
Right.
that's kind of something that we're tackling later on, but because it's just you can't control that. But what can we control, and what can we do today? And I think that that is a huge difference, as in what's in the works. what is available, but not right now, like that doesn't help anyone. So our focus is on today and what we can do.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Well, as we start to wrap up here, what is the best way for people to keep in touch with? Because it sounds like you have amazing stuff going on between the art and the different projects and, the story time and all that. Follow you on Facebook, or what's the best place for them to follow you?
Yeah, Facebook is my number one outlet right now. We do update the website quite often. I'm trying desperately to learn how to do more TikTok stuff, but my interns are way better at that than I am. But they're not with me for a lot of things. So I'm still trying to learn that. So we do have a TikTok page, and everything is just Parenting Autism United. We are doing some videos and little trainings that are like 30 seconds or less. We're trying to think of what somebody could read while they're either in the drive-through or listen to or watch, or in the bathroom drive-through while they're waiting for their kid to fall asleep, but they can't leave, or while they're in a class getting, or getting like speech therapy. So we're really taking that marketing bit, and we'll be very active on YouTube soon. And, I think once now it's so easy, we can just post it to all the platforms. But Facebook is our number one. And then our office just got moved to the roundabout in Dallas. So it's a much more visible location. It's got a paved parking lot in the back, and it's just a landmark that people can't miss. So we're literally on it.
Well,
So
that's fantastic for folks in Northeast PA or folks who want to come from somewhere else and check it out. Parenting Autism United, and I will put all that info in the show notes. Make sure you follow on Facebook. You said there's TikTok and YouTube. We're working on it, but right now Facebook, and I'll put a link to the website too, so that everyone can check
fabulous.
that out. Yeah. So, is there anything? I know we talked about a lot, and as I say this every week with my guests, because I think everyone is so fantastic. You could probably we could probably talk for a lot longer, but
Oh, I
in
know. Yeah.
in closing, is there any one thing that you're like, okay, here's one thing that I forgot to say that you just really want people to know? Anything else that you'd want to leave us with?
Yeah, when we're talking about our kids and the behaviors that they can show later in their years, my son now still has behaviors that you would expect a toddler, to show. When you're at the grocery store, you see someone having a hard time. The village does exist. We just have to act on it. I don't know how many times I've said, "Where's my village?" And I don't know how many times I've told my husband, "Go do that. Go help that lady. Go help that person," because nobody else is doing it. I know it's our instinct to keep our heads down and to ignore and to keep going. Um, Offer help, hold the door open for somebody, or I mean, it's weird when you offer to hold somebody's baby. Don't do that, but you know what I mean. Like, be the village that you would want yourself, and that's that age old. If you just be nice, be a good person. Um, but it's really just I know it's really difficult to understand or to implement, um, to do things for others because we're just told not to do that anymore sometimes. But that's what we need to do. We need to be there for our community. And if you see someone who needs help, even if it's a smile, that's enough. A smile goes a long way.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree more. You're right. And it's that there, as they say, the saying, there's no cost for a smile. There really isn't. And as we know, the research shows that helps. I mean, you could be giving a smile to someone who just had the worst day. It could mean a
Yeah.
lot too. Yeah. And holding the door. These are simple things that there's no reason that we can't all do. But to your point, if you do see someone struggling too, if you can step up and help out, because it would be nice to feel that community connection and that we're not alone, because we certainly need that help. All of us do at some point or another, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
it.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank my guest today was Lyndsay Dragon. It's Parenting Autism United. And again, I will put all that information in the show notes so that you can learn more and check it out. They're doing Lyndsay and her whole group there doing great things that is much needed. And hopefully you've been inspired, because maybe there's something missing in your community that could, help you, but help others like you. Remember, if it's not available to you, if something's not there, start it. There's no reason why you can't. And especially when you get people helping you can accomplish pretty much anything, I believe, for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you. We'll have some more fabulous, excuse me, if I could talk, fabulous females coming up in the weeks ahead. So many folks that are on tap that I've got lined up. I cannot wait to introduce them to you as always. So many wonderful women out there doing fantastic things. I hope to continue to inform, inspire, and entertain. And as I always say to you every week, I thank you so much for listening. I thank you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.